Welcome to Deep Dive. Welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. Let's dive in and grow together.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Annie Jacobsen's book, Nuclear War, a Scenario. And this book is particularly interesting because it isn't just a work of fiction.
Right.
It dives into a potential nuclear attack on the Pentagon, drawing on insights and interviews with experts who have actually planned for this kind of scenario.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how Jacobsen goes into such detail about the potential consequences of a nuclear attack.
Yeah.
Not just about the bomb itself, but like the long-term effects on government infrastructure,
Right. All of society.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's start with Chapter 1, which throws us right into the heart of the event.
Okay.
A 1-megaton nuclear weapon detonates over the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Jacobsen paints a very vivid picture of the immediate aftermath. What stood out to you in this initial depiction?
Well, I think the thing that really hit me was the sheer scale of the destruction. I mean, she describes this initial heat blast as being hotter than the surface of the sun.
Yeah.
It's just unimaginable.
It's not just the immediate impact either, right?
No, not at all.
Jacobsen emphasizes that this kind of event would overwhelm any kind of disaster response that we have in place.
It's just beyond anything that we're really prepared for.
Right. Hospitals, emergency services, communication networks.
Everything would be crippled.
Everything would be crippled.
Absolutely.
This leads to a really chilling point Jacobsen makes about the phrase dead when found.
Yeah.
It's not just a morbid saying, it's a stark reality in this scenario. Many people, even those seeking shelter, would be killed instantly
Yeah.
by the heat, the blast, or the collapsing infrastructure.
And even those who do survive that initial blast, they would face a whole new set of challenges. Jacobsen talks about this blast wave that would travel for miles, creating these hurricane-force winds that would topple buildings, turn debris into deadly projectiles.
It's hard to even comprehend that kind of force.
Imagine being caught in a windstorm, so powerful that it could lift a bus into the air.
Wow.
It's mind-boggling.
And then there's the issue of fire.
Right.
It wouldn't be just one fire, but a massive interconnected firestorm.
Fueled by ruptured gas lines, exploding chemical plants. Even something as mundane as a pilot light in a nearby home.
Yeah, Jacobsen doesn't shy away from these gruesome details. She really wants the reader to understand the true horror of what a nuclear attack would entail.
Yeah, and I think that's important because we tend to abstract these events
You do.
to think of them as distant possibilities
Yeah.
rather than immediate threats.
It's easier to push it to the back of our minds.
Absolutely. And one aspect that I think often gets overlooked is the issue of radiation.
Yeah?
Can you talk a little bit about how Jacobsen addresses the effects of fallout in this scenario?
Sure. So the book details how these radioactive particles, or fallout, would rain down on the area, contaminating everything, and making it incredibly dangerous for anyone to approach,
Yeah.
even rescuers.
So that would obviously severely hinder any immediate aid and recovery efforts.
Absolutely.
And to make matters even worse, Jacobsen also brings up the EMP effect.
For our listeners who may not be familiar, this is a pulse of electromagnetic energy that would essentially fry electronics,
Yeah.
taking out communication networks, power grids.
Throwing us back into a pre-technological age.
I mean, can you imagine a world without cell phones or the internet,
It's hard to even fathom.
or even working vehicles?
Yeah.
Suddenly, those who survived the initial blast would be completely isolated, struggling to find basic necessities like food, water, and shelter in a devastated and radioactive landscape.
Yeah, it would be complete chaos.
So at this point in the book, you've got this incredibly bleak picture being painted. And I think a natural question for any reader would be, how do we even know all of this?
It does seem almost too detailed, too specific to be based on just theory.
Right.
And that's where Jacobsen's research really shines. She reveals that the U.S. government has been meticulously wargaming nuclear scenarios for decades.
Wow, so they've really thought this through.
Oh, yeah.
These aren't just hypothetical exercises. They involve complex simulations, detailed analysis, and input from experts across various fields. It's both fascinating and unsettling to realize that so much thought and planning has gone into preparing for the unthinkable.
It really is.
And I think this leads us nicely into Chapter 2, where Jacobsen takes us back to a 1960 meeting
Okay.
that reveals just how deep this rabbit hole goes. But we'll save that for Part 2 of our deep dive.
Sounds good. So we're picking back up with Jacobsen's exploration of how the U.S. government has been preparing for a potential nuclear attack.
And in Chapter 2, she takes us back to 1960, to a meeting that I think a lot of people would find pretty surprising.
Yeah. What's interesting is that it wasn't about how to fight a nuclear war.
It was about what?
It was about how to ensure the continuity of government, how to keep the country functioning, at least in some capacity, after a devastating nuclear attack.
So even back then, they were thinking about the aftermath, about governing a potentially post-apocalyptic America.
Exactly, and this wasn't just some low-level planning session
Like,
either.
who was involved in this?
Well, Jacobsen details how this meeting brought together some of the most powerful figures in the U.S. government at the time. The Secretary of Defense, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff,
Wow.
even President Eisenhower's personal physician.
So they were taking this very serious.
Oh, absolutely.
What kind of things were they discussing?
Well, imagine this. Washington, D.C. is gone, millions are dead, communication systems are down, and the threat of further attacks is very real.
Yeah.
How do you even begin to coordinate a response?
Right.
Who's in charge? These are the questions they were grappling with.
It's a level of chaos that's hard to even fathom.
It really is.
So what did they come up with?
Was there some kind of master plan? Well, not exactly a master plan, but they did establish a chain of command, a designated survivor system, and a series of secret relocation bunkers for key government officials. Essentially, they were trying to create this shadow government ready to step in if the unthinkable happened.
It's almost like something out of a movie, except this was real life, happening back in the 1960s at the height of the Cold War.
And Jacobsen's book really emphasizes that these weren't just theoretical exercises.
They were actually preparing for this.
Yeah, they were deadly serious about ensuring the survival of the government, even in the face of a nuclear catastrophe.
It makes you wonder, are these plans still in place today? I mean, the world has changed a lot since the 1960s.
That's a question Jacobsen raises but doesn't answer directly.
It's a question that should make us all think, especially in a world where, sadly, nuclear threats are still very real.
Exactly what safeguards are in place? Who gets to decide the fate of a nation after such a catastrophic event? These are questions that we as citizens should be asking.
Absolutely, and Jacobsen doesn't stop there. In Chapter 3, she takes us even deeper into this world of nuclear war planning, focusing on how these plans were actually put to the test.
And this is where things get really interesting. Jacobsen examines a particular war game, a simulation, that reveals some unsettling flaws in how we think about nuclear command and control. It highlights the potential dangers of human error, miscalculation, and the fog of war.
Wait, what happened? Don't leave us hanging.
Well, let's just say this particular war game, as Jacobsen details, got a little too real, and the consequences were almost unthinkable.
Okay, now I really need to know what happened. We'll have to continue this discussion in Part 3 of our deep dive. All right, so we're back, and you left us on quite a cliffhanger with that war game that went wrong.
Right.
Can you tell us a bit more about what Jacobsen uncovered?
Yeah, so in Chapter 3, Jacobsen focuses on this 1979 simulation known as Proud Prophet.
And what makes this simulation so significant?
Well, it exposed some really unsettling vulnerabilities in the entire nuclear command and control system.
Okay.
Essentially, a series of miscalculations and miscommunications during the simulation
Oh.
led to a scenario where the U.S. almost launched a full-scale nuclear attack.
Wait, so you're saying they almost launched real nukes because of a simulation?
It wasn't quite that simple. The system was designed to be incredibly realistic, to test these decision-making processes under intense pressure.
Yeah, I can imagine the pressure in that kind of situation.
And in this case, the pressure revealed some critical flaws. Decisions were being made based on incomplete or misinterpreted information. Assumptions were made that turned out to be false. And all of this contributed to this rapid escalation that almost resulted in a simulated nuclear apocalypse.
It's a terrifying thought that human error could lead to such catastrophic consequences.
It really is.
So did they fix the problems? Did they learn from their mistakes?
Well, that's where things get a bit complicated. Jacobsen suggests that while there have been some significant improvements in technology and training, that fundamental human element remains a major concern.
So we still have to contend with the possibility of human error.
Yeah, even with all the safeguards in place.
And this is a point that Jacobsen really drives home throughout the book, right?
Absolutely.
The potential for misjudgment, for biases, for the fog of war to cloud our judgment. These are still very real risks, even in today's world.
Exactly.
And it makes you wonder what safeguards are in place today. How much of this is still shrouded in secrecy?
That's the question Jacobsen leaves us with. She concludes the book with this stark reminder that the threat of nuclear war, it's not a relic of the Cold War.
Right.
It's a very real danger. And understanding the potential consequences is crucial for all of us.
This has certainly been a thought-provoking deep dive.
Yeah.
And I have to say that Jacobsen's book is a must-read for anyone who wants to understand the realities of the nuclear age.
I completely agree.
It's not always an easy read,
No.
but it's a necessary one. It forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our world and the systems we rely on.
I think that's a really important point.
So what does all of this mean for us, for the everyday listener who might be feeling a bit overwhelmed by this information?
Well, I think the key takeaway here is that understanding the potential consequences of nuclear war, it's not just an academic exercise. It's about being aware of the risks, being informed about the issues, and engaging in thoughtful discussions about how we can navigate these complex challenges.
I think that's a great point to end on. Knowledge is power, even when it's uncomfortable. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, and we encourage you to check out Annie Jacobsen's Nuclear War, a scenario for a deeper understanding of this topic.